our guest speaker, but I would like to remind people of two upcoming events. On May 11th, there's going to be a walk to Edgerton, and if you don't know about Edgerton, Dale can inform you later on where it is and what you need to do to get there. We meet at Ellsworth parking lot, and it's on May 11th. On May 4th, the Lackawanna Historical Society is going to hold their annual game show. You live here, you should know this. It's a trivia game with local celebrities that is a great fundraiser, good night out, and it's supported by our Valley View School and our Riverside School District. This would be a good time if you have your phone on to put it on vibrate too. It's a great honor to introduce S. Robert Powell. Dr. Powell is a retired university professor who taught at Penn State, SUNY, College of Oswego, Brooklyn College, and Susquehanna University. He's a member of the board of directors of Carbondale Public Library, the oldest library in Lackawanna County, for 40 years. Also, he's an author of hundreds of published articles on a broad range of topics: local history, genealogy, animal husbandry, railroads, and a 24-volume set of books on the Delaware and Hudson Canal Company. And finally, Dr. Paul is the president of the Carbondale Historical Society and the Carbondale D&H Transportation Museum for 40 years. Once again, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. S. Robert Powell.
Thank you. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here. I didn't realize I knew so many people from Archibald. I know a lot of people in the room, and that's very nice. James Archibald and is one of my major heroes in my life, and it's good to be in a community named after him, because what he did for all of us, beginning in 1845 when the railroad came down here, it changed everything, and it came to Archibald in 1845, and that was certainly a major event in the history of the D&H. But anyhow, I'm here not to talk about the railroad, which I love to do, but I'm here to talk about the UFO that took place on November 9th, 1974 at 7:05 p.m. A UFO was observed directly over the pond, the silt pond in Russell Park by the cemetery, by two boys who were on the D&H Railroad right-of-way in Childs. At 3:30 p.m., these two boys saw a UFO in the middle of the afternoon. On the following day, that night, three Carbondale teenagers, Robert Gillette, Bill Lloyd, and John Lloyd, saw a UFO, and they reported it to the police. Let me read a statement I have here from them. Around 7 p.m., according to statements later made to the police, Bill Lloyd, his brother John, and their friend Bob Gillette were walking along 12th Avenue, which borders the local football field, then vacant. Suddenly they heard a noise in the sky. They looked up and saw something coming over the mountain, which abuts the eastern end of the street. It was a yellow-white thing with red sparks shooting out of it, said John Lloyd. It was like a falling star coming down. It was flying east to west, said Bob Gillette, and it sure was fast. It was sort of like a yellowish red star and came down in an arc. I didn't see any tail or sparks on it. The youth said they watched it sail over the football field when it fell out of the line of vision. Seconds later, they heard it hit the water. It made a sizzling sound, said John Lloyd, a fizz, like when you throw a cigarette into water. It was lower pitched, however. To the west of the football field was a pond that covered roughly an acre. Decades earlier, when Carbondale was a coal mining capital, the pond had been part of a coal washing operation. The boys ran to the pond. They told police they saw a light coming from the bottom of the pond, about 20 feet from shore. It was orange with a sort of red glow in the middle, said Gillette. It was about 5 feet in diameter. It got brighter, then dimmer, then brighter again, and kept doing that, back and forth. It was glowing like a flashlight, said John Lloyd. The air smelled funny, like gas from a stove. The boys called police. The boys told police. They ran back to the Lloyd brothers' apartment 3 blocks away to tell an older brother what they had seen. Other neighborhood teenagers went back to the pond with them, saw the light, and then phoned the police. So they called the police at 7 o'clock. They saw it, then they called the police at 9:10. After making the phone call at 9:10, the group returned to the pond. The light now seemed to have moved about 10 feet closer to the shore. It was still going from bright to dim to back again to bright. Bob Gillette later reported, sometimes it also seemed to be moving under the water, but that could have been just the movement of the waves. The teenagers waited for the police. An hour passed, no policeman arrived. At 9:10, they called the police again. So at 7 o'clock, they saw it, they called, nobody came. 2 hours later, they called back to the police department. The police came. The chief of police at the time was Paul Kelly, who was a wonderful man, who was out of town at the time. And so the person who was in charge of the police department was Detective Sergeant Francis Dottle. I knew Francis Dottle very well. He was he was full of spunk and fire, and he had, I think he sort of wore symbolically boxing gloves his whole life. He was always ready to go at it with anybody who for any reason whatsoever. He was a very likable, lovable guy, but he was one of these guys who just loved to sort of always be right in the middle of controversy and fights and things. And so he came. Chief of police was out of town, so he came up to the silt pond, and with his assistant, whose name I have, Patrolman Mark Trella. They arrived at the landing site, and they fired. This is very typically Francis Dottle, Mitch Dottle, as everybody called him. They arrived at the silt pond at Russell Park, and they fired 4 rounds of gunfire at the submerged object in the pond with this light. They shot at it with their police weapons. So it was a great to do on Friday night when this all happened, and things then sort of settled down until Saturday morning. At Saturday morning, things really went into high gear, and let me tell you. Let me find my appropriate sheet on that. I should mention that at the same time that the UFO was seen in Carbondale, there was an incident that happened in Wayne County in a completely unrelated matter. The Sheriff Kalinowski from Wayne County reported that on Saturday, 2 boys in Wayne County reported seeing, quote, a weird lighted object flashing through the sky. This was completely an unrelated news story from Wayne County that came out in the days following the initial landing in Carbondale. So that it's interesting in all this stuff about UFOs to try and to keep sources of information separated from each other, so they don't pollute each other and sort of cross-pollinate each other with stories that are made up or invented, but they're completely independent reports, which makes it very, very hard to sort of separate fact from fiction. So Saturday night, things were pretty crazy. On Sunday morning, things quieted down on Saturday night. On Sunday morning, 1,000 people had gathered at the park. This was with dawn on Sunday morning. 1,000 people were at the park. At 7 a.m., 2,000 people were at the park. By noon, there were 10,000 people at Russell Park looking at this silt pond and wondering what was going on. Then they made their first attempt to figure out what was in the bottom of the pond to get the pond. Dottle was looking around to find some kind of grappling hook, and they couldn't find a grappling hook. So ultimately what they found was a fishing net on a pole, a fish retrieval thing. And they went out into the pond, and they made an attempt to sort of scoop up this, whatever it was in the bottom of the pond, and they couldn't get it, but they then scooped up some muck and things into this recovery net. And Donald, being the high energy person that he was, they decided it was not radioactive and that it was benign, and they did a quick analysis of the muck which came up in this net from the bottom of the pond. They dealing with the crowd was an interesting phenomenon, because like 10,000 people standing around Russell Park looking at a silt pond where nothing seemed to be going on. As I say, by noon there were 10,000 people in the area. Police with bullhorns moved the crowd back to the parking lot adjacent to the football field. The roads leading to the park were roped off. A lane was kept open for emergency vehicles. The crowd thinned only slightly. Many people took positions on nearby hills and watched with binoculars. Donald was considering draining the pond and trying to locate someone with the necessary equipment. During the afternoon, Sergeant Bailey arrived from Wayne County with the scuba equipment and volunteered to dive for the object. Donald said, "No, I don't want anyone in the water until Hynek's men said it was safe." This Hynek, I'll tell you about him in a second. "And I don't want to stir up the crowd. If they saw something going up in this, someone going in with scuba equipment, there's no telling what they might do." Dozens of newsmen arrived and tried to get past the ropes. Donald would let them by. There wasn't even a light to show them, and there were newsmen. If the crowd saw one of the civilians pass the ropes, it could have been troublesome, said Donald. So then they've created a whole era of don't go near it. And at this point, Donald went into action by notifying lots of people. On the scene, Douglas K. Danes of Portchester, New York, regional director of the Mutual UFO Network, and dozens of other people appeared at police headquarters with credentials of one sort or another. Donald turned most of them away, except he accepted the credentials of two people. One, Matthew Graybar, executive director of the UFO Research Information Center, Philadelphia, and Robert D. Barry, director of the 20th Century UFO Bureau, Collingswood, New Jersey. When Donald first appeared on the scene at the pond, he started making phone calls to all manner of people, telling them, "We've got something going on here in Carbondale." And that's how it sort of got into the official kind of network of communications between one government agency and another. And so that these people started to arrive on the following day very quickly at the park. Two more scuba divers offered to make the recovery attempt. They identified themselves as Dr. Lawrence Berry, professor of psychology and geology at Temple, and George Kelly, instructor in meteorology at Temple. Donald told him to stand by. Robert Berry, 20th Century UFO, passed out religious pamphlets saying the world was coming to an end. We had a religious aspect to the whole thing, so that there was a lot of controversy involved. The thing which is interesting is the fact that as soon as Donald arrived on the scene after they shot into the pond, he started calling people, telling them about this, and then news spread very quickly, and a lot of people got involved in the process. So that all day Saturday there was this wild hysteria going on at the pond, and things quieted down overnight, and then on Sunday the whole area was cordoned off for 12 hours. No one was allowed anywhere near the silt pond. Now, those 10 or 12,000 people, that must have required a certain amount of high energy to cordon off that area. but for 12 hours on Sunday, nobody was allowed anywhere near the area. Interestingly enough, in that 12 hours, in that 12-hour period, people, of course, were sort of seated on the bank, high up on the bank, and could sort of see certain things. They could sort of see into the Russell Park area, but they weren't allowed anywhere near it. And whether you are a UFO believer or not, interesting things happened on Sunday, which really fanned the flames of credibility for what happened in the park. Over the years, I would think probably 15, 20 people that I know well, have known forever, and whose credibility is as high as you could possibly want. They're solid, reasonable citizens. They're not lunatics, very respectable people. They've said to me, Robert, here's what I saw. And the interesting thing is that the two things happened during this 12-hour moratorium at the park where no one was allowed near it. One was the appearance of a large flatbed trailer, a truck, big flatbed trailer arrived, and men wearing uniforms. Nobody has come forward to say what kind of uniforms, but people wearing uniforms were on this flatbed trailer which went into the Russell Park area. And also a sort of bread truck type vehicle, sort of a boxy bread delivery kind of vehicle, also appeared and went right in. Later after they had gone in, people, as I say, some very solid, respectable people have said to me, Robert, here's what I saw. I saw a large object be wrapped in plastic, put on the flatbed trailer, and went out of the park. It didn't stop, but with police protection escorts, it went out of the park. Yes, sir.
It was covered with a tarp also.
With a tarp. People talk about black plastic. I didn't hear. I wasn't aware of the tarp. But that's interesting fact. But the object, some kind of object, was covered in a tarp and in black plastic, and then went out of the park. The other vehicle, this van type truck, small van, went in and never came back out. And if you know the area up in the area of Russell Park, I think probably what happened, the exit for that is, there are a lot of mine roads and things which one could have continued in the back behind Russell Park, and one could have come out the back way. But that van type vehicle never made a return trip back out where all these thousands of people who were gathered who might have seen the park. But this object is very intriguing to me personally about the fact that so many people have told me that they saw this truck happen. So a lot of people, a lot of doubters and skeptics say, "Oh yeah, sure, fine, yeah, it was a meteorite." But then what was on this truck? Where did they get it? Where did it go? Why was it being taken out with all this security that was associated with the departure of this truck? So there was a lot of strange feelings in the air after this Saturday departure of this truck with the vehicle. Sunday, as I say, the area was closed for 12 hours. On Monday, they went in there, and Doddle and the others had a boat, and they went out and they launched the boat. And at 2:35 on Monday, they retrieved from the bottom of the sill pond a railroad lantern. At 6 p.m. on Monday, the city of Carbondale held a press conference on the whole event. During all this, the aerial photographs were taken of the whole thing. There were lots of flyovers, people taking pictures, and the thing really got going big time as it went on. Let me read you what I have here about. Still, there was a period of more than 12 hours when public and press was excluded from the site. On Sunday, before the dive, Doddle ordered several pieces of heavy equipment to the area. These included a crane with a strong magnet and several grappling hooks. Doddle said these were standby measures in the event that divers, having located the object, were unable to get it out of the water manually. But critics note that the equipment could have been used to remove something from the pond during the press lockout. Then here's the delivery truck. The Carbondale News quoted a witness that a delivery truck from a department store was permitted past the police barricades on Sunday and did not return. The witnesses pointed out that the rugged dirt roads leading away from the pond is in the opposite direction. The road is not considered navigable by the ordinary car, but probably could have been negotiated by a sturdy truck. If something had been taken from the pond, the delivery truck would be one way of getting it out of the area. So there's those two trucks. So the thing that is interesting is the fact that they retrieved from the pond a lantern. Okay, a railroad lantern. Some of you probably knew personally Charlotte Morrow, who was mayor of Carbondale. Charlotte was a dear lady, was mayor of Carbondale for quite a number of years, and Charlotte was a very, I liked her a lot. She was a very dear person, but she was a very mouthy, loud person. If Charlotte was within 2 blocks of you, you knew she was there, because she never said anything in sort of in a low tone of voice. She was always out there proclaiming something or other. She was a great advocate of all manner of causes. Anyhow, I was on the 3rd floor of City Hall during her term as mayor, and it was a quiet afternoon. I was sitting there. If you went in the door, my desk is sort of like to the left, and Charlotte, very uncharacteristically, she appeared at the door, and she was such a strong-willed, vocal person. I thought, well, if she's got something to say, she's going to let her take the lead. She's coming to see me. Let her say, hello, Robert, or what's going on, or whatever. She came to the door, and I could see that she was at the door, and she came to the door, and it was so uncharacteristically Charlotte Morrow. She came to the door, and as 2 minutes at the doorway, and she sort of got to the door, and she saw me there, and then she did this. Extended her hand with this lantern in it, and I said nothing. And then after I had it in my hand, she sort of quickly made an exit, went back down the stairs. I didn't say a word to her. She didn't say a word to me. It was so unlike Charlotte to be that kind of way. Usually she would walk in, well, Paul, what the hell's going on up here? That kind of attitude. But she said nothing this time, and she just sort of handed off like she was trying to sort of hand off a controversial object. I think what she was doing is the fact that at this press conference on Monday, where all these officials and the police and everyone else, they had the lantern. They had a lantern, and I think the lantern probably just sort of stayed in the office of the mayor in City Hall for several administrations, and then it got to Charlotte. And when she was going out of office, I think she decided that she wanted to get this into sort of the right hands, so to speak. She wanted somebody else to have this. She didn't want to leave her term of office with it sort of on a cabinet or in a desk. She wanted to get it to the Historical Society. So she gave it to me, and that was it. I never asked her, what's the story on the lantern, Charlotte? Because I mean, it was. If she wanted to tell me something about the lantern, she would have told me something about the lantern. And I thought, well, I'll let her take the lead, and she said nothing about it, and that was that. So that sort of leads me to believe that maybe this is probably the lantern that was in at the press conference on Monday about this UFO, and I think this is probably the lantern. May or may not be the lantern that was retrieved from the sill pond. But anyhow, as it turns out, it's a perfectly good railroad lantern, which I then took and put on display in one of our display cabinets with other railroad stuff. Even though I know that it's got this association with the UFO. But the thing which there's so many interesting stories that have emerged from these events, which I very rapidly sort of outlined for you. people have come forward with all manner of things. Somebody told me not too long ago that they worked at the radio station WCDL right up there on the top of Salem Mountain, not too awfully far from where the UFO is said to have landed. And one of the people who worked for WCDL at the time said to one of these sort of quasi-military types or police, I can hardly wait to get back to the radio station to sort of talk about, to spread the word. They came, a whole bunch of them came down on him big time. Keep your mouth shut. We don't want a single word said about this broadcast on WCDL. Okay. And it was true that not a word was said about it on WCDL. Also, an interesting thing about about much of this UFO incident material is there was very little press follow-up on it in the following days. The following day there was a little blurb here and there about it, but then very little follow-up in an official kind of way on what happened there on Friday, Saturday, Sunday in Russell Park. And that seemed sort of odd. There were people, some young boys who happened to be hanging out, I think drinking beer probably, in the cemetery not too far from the landing site. And sort of quasi-military type people said, "What are you guys doing in here?" And then they quickly escorted them out of the cemetery and took them home they lived on the west side, Carbondale. That was told to me by one of those guys who was escorted home by these quasi-military types from the park. The fact that these 10,000 people have materialized so quickly, somebody said to me, Robert, that was the area when everybody had a CB in their vehicle, and so word spread very quickly, and people started arriving from all over the place. That may have accounted for that sudden explosion of 10,000 people in the park within really record time. When I did this presentation in the Albright Library in Scranton last fall, a lady came forward and said, "Robert, I know her very well. Barbara Coleman, her name is," and she came up to me and she said, "Robert, here's a bunch of pictures. I was there," she said. I took pictures. She showed me pictures she took, and that's what she's doing in this photograph. She's showing me pictures of what happened in that park. She told me about the truck and seeing something get on the truck and away it went. I have every reason to take Barbara's word as being she's not just sort of fabricating things. She's telling me what happened. There were then official reports of all kinds started appearing. Here's I got in the mail the Carbondale UFO Crash: The Reality, the Hoaxes, and the Legend by Matthew Graybar, and a very sort of lots of photographs and sketches of the area and things about the incident. In here, this one is even more detailed. Lots of pages with illustrations of sketches of what people have reported seeing, and maps and all manner of stuff. Maps of the area where it all happened, So people, there was a lot of official stuff. As I say, this stuff came in the mail to me from the UFO Report and Information Center in Philadelphia. The Anatomy of a UFO Retrieval Myth is what it's called. Carbondale UFO Crash Chronicles. So there's a lot of information sort of has been appearing in the years since the incident. Those three people who saw it in 1974, Robert Gillette and his friends, later came forward and said, "Oh, that we made that story up. He had just broken up with his girlfriend, and then so the whole story of the lantern in the pond was he said it was made up." Okay. In 99, 74, 99, I think it was, the woman, Kay Pope, who was there, said, I was 15 at the time. I remember riding my bicycle to Russell Park, seeing it cordoned off by the military. And she also saw what appeared to be something large being removed from the area. We always rode our bikes up there. We now live in Blakely. I saw a big flatbed truck on the road with something huge on it that was covered, and there were lots of people in military uniforms. Then now Gillette comes forward and says, I made up that story about throwing the story in the pond. I didn't throw the lantern. There was something beyond the lantern, said this Gillette person in 1999. So it just goes on and on. It's hard to know who to believe about what they saw. One of the people associated with all this was from his name is Weber. He's a quasi-official with the state of Pennsylvania. I hear reports of lights in the sky, maneuvers in the sky, unknown objects, triangles in the sky, Mr. Weber said. In Pennsylvania, we average 25 to 35 cases a month. We have means of testing the credibility. We take the report, establish contact with the witnesses, and do an investigation. In 85% of the cases, the investigators are able to explain what they saw. In the other 15%, they are not. So there are both. A lot of these sightings have been debunked, but not all of them. So what happened? What happened in the on that weekend in 1974? As I think many of you know or realize, I mean that was the area when all kinds of Soviet space exploration was going on. There was lots of Soviet space garbage coming out of the skies all the time, and people have advanced the notion that what was coming out of that an object did land up there, and that it was probably a part of a Soviet satellite, which explained why all the military type stuff going on. Let's get that satellite or whatever it was that came out of the sky and study it and see what we can learn about what just came out of the sky, if it was in fact a part of a Soviet satellite. That's what a lot of people have come forward to say about what went on in the sky. The thing which is so interesting to me is that when independent reports start coming up with the same facts, it sort of raises the level of credibility. Here were these kids in Wayne County who had nothing to do with what was going on in Carbondale, saw lights in the sky. Somebody came up to me when I last did this and said, Robert, I was driving up the Scranton Highway at the time, and I saw those lights over Russell Park. Said a very credible person to me. Thank you very much. So that it's hard to separate, I guess, fact from fiction. It's hard to know who to believe. But I know from my own personal experience. I mean, I live out in country 3 or 4 miles outside of Carbondale. Sometimes when I'm driving home at night, 8 or 9 o'clock after dark, I'm driving along and I see sort of a bright light up there. I'm driving along. And suddenly, within 2 seconds, it's on the other side of the sky. How did that happen? What did I just see? I've seen that 2 or 3 times. That kind of thing happen where you're looking. I happen to think about the stars, astronomy. I happen to know, and I know a lot about it. But I mean, you're looking up there, and all of a sudden, something moves with a speed greater than no airplane could possibly do that kind of. And I've seen 2 or 3 of those kinds of things. First time I saw it, I think, well, Robert, you're tired. Go home and go to bed, you know. But then, having seen it 2 or 3 times, I thought, I don't know what I saw. I honestly don't know what I saw. All the time, one hears about reports of what commercial pilots see from the cockpit of their planes flying all over the world. And there have been a lot of reports by commercial pilots who sort of say, you're not going to believe what I think I just saw, this kind of stuff, but reports by people seeing things in the sky. Anyhow, it's an interesting story, and the fact that so many people from so many different realms of the world have come forward and said, here's what I saw. makes one, if one wanted to be skeptical, one would have to sort of, you'd have to, hey, I need a better explanation than maybe it's true or not true. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of information out there that has to be sort of sorted through. One could devote a lot of time and a lot of energy to sorting it all out. I mean, I don't consider myself to be an expert on the topic by any means. The Historical Society happens to have a very substantial folder of stuff on it, and I've familiarized myself with the material in the folder enough to be here. But there have been a lot of studies done, and I think maybe there's probably a lot more to be said on it. Maybe someone here in the room has had experience of seeing that kind of those kind of lights in the sky, or maybe even on that fateful day in 1974, maybe somebody from the perspective of Archibald saw it. But I don't think it can be. I'm not even sure what my own personal stance on it is, but there are a lot of things one sees in the sky that are unexplained. But the thing which really has me taking it all very seriously is the fact that when people who I've known well for a long time and whose seriousness as a human being with both feet on the ground have told me what they have seen or what they saw that night or since then, that makes me sort of think, well, I think this has to be taken seriously. So it's a very interesting topic, and one that is it certainly, there's a lot more that could be said, probably maybe and should be said on it. But anybody have anything they want to add at this point? Sir, you happen to know about a TARP? What was your source of information on that?
Well, myself and my father went up. We were standing there. The flatbed went in. It was a flatbed truck, and you're right. It was looked like a red utility truck, like you said, but it looked like military to me. I'm not sure. And it went in empty, and it came out with something on it. That's for sure.
What was that something, and where did it go?
What it was, I had no idea what was on it, but there was definitely something on it.
I think that
It
certainly.
was definitely, I thought it was military. My dad was in the military, and he thought it was military. He's since passed away, but
That certainly supports the notion that it might have been that maybe some space garbage came out of the sky and it was being quietly and quickly taken off to some military base for study and analysis. Joe? Or Tom, sorry, Tom?
Yes. Is there any chance it could have been Saturday night instead of Friday night in your report?
I thought it was Saturday when I saw it.
Let me look at
It was Saturday night.
did I say Friday? It was Saturday, yes.
You did
Okay.
say Friday. I thought it was Saturday.
May I speak on that?
Oh, sure, yeah, by all means, yeah.
Saturday night, November 9th, 1974.
Yes,
Saturday night. I shall never forget what I saw. I know where I was going. There was a mass across the street, 7:30. Leaving my home up on the hill, 7:05. Looking over Salem Mountain, the horizon, there was the sphere, an orange-colored ball going towards Carbondale. It wasn't going fast. It was a little blurred because of clouds or whatever, but it was Saturday night, 7:05, and I didn't hear about it later on. I made a note of it. Definitely, it was that light. Salem Mountain up there, the horizon, going towards Carbondale. There's a good website, casebook.com, UFOcasebook.com, Carbondale, and the doctor mentioned 4 shots. He mentions 6 shots fired into the pond, and one of the policemen fell off the boat, and there was quicksand there. He had a struggle getting out, and the names are named. Monday was a holiday. You recall that? Veterans Day. So we spent the day observing there what was happening down there. It was a festive atmosphere then. Like, it's over at 4 or 5 o'clock. Go home now. You know, Dr. Coffin was the mayor. I think he wanted the people out of town that way. And Doctor mentioned briefly the Wayne County experience, which interferes with your Carbondale topic. I have information on that right here. I have the name of the boy who was killed and all that, and what happened in Wayne County, but I won't take that.
Yes, sir.
I remember the incident. Hi, Joe. My name is Joe from Jessup. I remember the incident well. I was at my uncle's store in Jessup, and we were going to go up, and the customer was saying there's too many people up there. Now, I have a question. I've never been to Russell Park. Is it deep enough? Is that pond deep enough to have had a UFO submerge into it?
It could have been. I mean, some of those. It was. Some of those ponds were very deep. I mean, it could have been 25 or 30 feet deep. I mean, depending on the mining activity in the area. But I don't know how deep that was. But I don't think it was that deep. I think it was 8 or 10 feet maybe max. I mean, maybe not even that deep. But and it's the pond for years was in that far back corner of Russell Park, and depending on the mining activity that specifically that took place in that area, the depth of the pond could have been anything. But the fact that this lantern, this glowing light, was sort of seen in the pond, I think if it had been down like 20 feet, you might not have seen it, but 8 or 10 feet, the visibility would have been. So I don't know if anybody's ever gotten around to saying how deep they thought, how deep the pond. Maybe in one of these reports it mentions how deep the pond was, but I think maybe 8 or 10 feet is.
Yes. Probably that's right. I also have something to add. I worked with someone from Carbondale, about my age, and he told me that it was his cousin that threw the lantern in the pond, and he said that they didn't realize they got scared at first when they saw people coming around and the light was reflecting, and that they ran away, and then when they saw that everybody was coming, they were getting a kick out of it. And that was what he had told me. But I will say that, I'll add that I certainly do believe in UFO activity, because I saw one where I was coming out of work in Dunmore. I can't pinpoint the year trying to do that. But I was on third shift, and we used to go over, a bunch of us used to go over to, this was like behind the Price Chopper. We used to go over to the donut shop at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the group I was with left first, and I was alone, and I got to the place as they had already gotten in, and as I was getting out of the car. And I'm saying this is probably in the 80s, from 88 to 90, somewhere in there. On the Marshwood Road, I would say it was like 2 miles from behind Price Chopper there. I saw an enormous, it was 2.5 football fields. And I've seen pictures of it on UFO shows. It was almost shaped like a figure 8. And it goes extremely slow. And it must, I would say maybe got to 1,000 feet, and then it went. And when I went into work, I asked if anybody else saw it. They said no, but they had already been in. So I am not discrediting anybody's opinion, because I've seen something myself too. But that's the story that this guy gave me at work, my friend. That it was all a hoax.
I think that kind of completely a story like that completely unrelated to any sort of information out there in print. And I think that's the kind of information which really opens the door to credibility. It's if such people saw such things who were 10 miles away and were not connected to it in any way at all, that helps enhance the credibility of the story. Thank you for Tom for the clarification. I knew I was talking about a 3-day sequence, and I got my days mixed up. It was Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Yes, Monday was the big day with the holiday. The Saturday night was when, and then Sunday was the quarantine, and then Monday was the press conference. Yes.
Doctor, how could young teenage boys get in possession of a valuable lamp such as that?
Well,
Why would they have it?
it could have been belonged to their father, grandfather, uncle, a railroader. I mean, it's not a especially rare object. I mean, so it could have been a family possession. So the kids themselves might not have had it, but somebody who worked for the railroad in the family could easily have had it.
How long do they claim that light was lit in the pond?
Oh gosh, the lights, it went on all day Sunday, the light was still going on, and
3 a.m. they say.
3 a.m. But I mean, this a new battery in this thing, it would go for weeks. It's got a huge battery in this lantern that would keep it going for a long time. And it does seem, it's so sealed up that I can believe it could be waterproof too. I don't know, I have never tested it, but I believe it could be waterproof. Yes, sir.
The lantern company was contacted after the event, and they said it would last about 8 minutes max underwater. It was a 6 volt.
If water got in, it would probably cause problems. But I don't know whether that's. I never tried it, but it seems to me this is pretty hermetically sealed. I mean, I'm not doubting anybody's word on it. Yes, sir.
Let's test it.
Pardon me?
Let's test it. Get a bucket of water.
That's what I thought.
Oh, that battery's dead.
Even our battery
You know, it's yes, sir.
Those teenagers scoring later on, years later,
Did they what?
did they recant? No, it was the ones who claimed it was a hoax.
Yes, they went back and forth on their story. Years later, initially they said, of course, it came out of the sky. Then years later they said, no, it was we made it all up. And then now they say we didn't make it up. So it's their credibility. They seem to change their mind with the passing breeze. But they were involved with it. But one can't you can't connect the dots. How can you connect these teenagers getting the police involved with the first person recollection of this man who saw something in the sky as well? I mean, so there's something. What that man saw was not connected to these three teenagers. Dale.
There's a retired firefighter from up the valley. I don't want to use his name there. He was there. He told me, he said, I told you enough, I'm not going to come down here, but he said it was part of a satellite. I'm not sure if they ascertained it was Soviet at that point. He said it did turn out to be Soviet. But he said, just like when the Columbia shuttle came down, there's all governments, every part had to be picked up. Same thing there. That's what he told me. He said, I told you enough already. He said, but that's what it was. And he was there when they loaded on that flatbed truck, and it was military, that truck.
They were in contact with a Russian news agency also, so that would make sense.
Yes, the space garbage story makes it's easy to believe it because of the. For me, it is anyhow because of the at that era, such events were not that rare, but and maybe something did come down and whether it splashed into the pond or whether it may not, it could have crashed into the ground next to the pond and then was retrieved and put on a truck and you have such a quizzical look on your face, Tom. What's wrong?
What side am I on, you know?
Doctor, what's your opinion? What's your theory?
My opinion is I think something did come out of the sky. I mean that I can believe that because of what people saw go onto the flatbed truck and out of the park. It went in empty and it went out with something on it. That strikes me as being whatever it was. That coupled with the Soviet satellite stuff makes a plausible story in my book. The business of kids throwing this lantern in the park, well, that's or the pond. That's just sort of But the world was at that point was certainly ready to believe anything coming out of the sky. The police department went into high gear as if we were having a major invasion by Martians going on in Russell Park. That's how the police department responded to the story. So they took it all very seriously and got all kinds of people, and there were agencies out there who were more than happy to support their belief about what happened. It's without the flatbed truck story and the large object and people who saw that whole truck. The truck is a very strong component, which makes me want to believe something came out of the sky. That seems like that's an easy pill to swallow. Without the flatbed truck and the large object on the truck, I would say, yeah, right, sure, yeah, thank you very much, and call it a day. But the military type uniforms in the truck and the object adds a lot of credibility. At the same time, the stories like this man mentioned, seeing things in the sky, and what Tom saw coming out of the sky, he saw the light. That seems like there were things were going on on that Saturday night. So that makes me want to believe that something came out of the sky, whether it was a satellite. I'm more inclined to believe it was a satellite than we were being invaded by Martians or something. But I think I'm more inclined to go with the satellite story, or there's something out of the sky. But I don't think the story's finished yet, man.
Maybe to maintain the secrecy, that kids were paid to create the hoax?
Anything's possible. It seems that well, it's possible. Who knows? I mean, finding you can't just sort of grab 3 teenagers and say, "Here's $50. Do this for me." Kind of. I guess you could, but that's certainly a possibility. I don't know.
And a lantern, how would it go on and then off and on and off?
Yeah, if it was dying, the light would have gone out, and that would have been it. But so whether this had spent some time at the bottom of that silk pot or not, I don't really know.
Is there anything that remains classified since the military was involved? Is there anything that remains classified till this day?
There must be. I haven't explored that option. I don't know.
We have the right to know.
Pardon me?
Do we have the right to know?
I think we probably do. Yeah. I don't think there's any. But there's a lot of these sort of reports from UFO agents. All the data could be sort of gathered together, and then if one really wanted to make a thing about it, one could sort of go after government agencies and say, look, we need to know what happened in Carbondale on that November night in 1974. But I think an important thing is to. And in a way, talks like this tonight are good for sort of allowing new voices to be heard. And one could spend a lot of time just gathering data about from reliable sources and or from sources, and trying to make the most of it. But the lights in the sky thing. I mean, as I mentioned, when I see these sort of lights. How did that happen? What did I just see? I don't know what I just saw. That kind of stuff. That sort of makes me think, well, maybe there are things going on around me I don't know about. But it's an interesting topic. The long and short of it is, I think it's important that we keep the door open and be prepared to. Gather information and to listen, and maybe one of these days we'll get some definitive answers. But in the meantime, I think we're sort of still in the gathering data about what happened in that Russell Pond area.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight.